three different stories of people who basically learned some very valuable lessons about philanthropy. Philanthropy is known as giving to others when, of course, you discover the incredible power of giving. In fact, there is a phrase that goes like this: it is better to give than to receive. Now, in a world in which we live right now, almost every day, well, every day, millions of people around the world go into local lottery booths and stores and buy the lottery tickets. In their minds, they're thinking to themselves, you know what? I am going to win the big one. And when I win the big one, life is going to be easy. Life is going to, of course, be all sunshine and roses. Let me tell you a couple of stories about what happened to people that I know who won the big one. One of them was back in the 1980s. I was living in the city of Yellowknife at that time, and one of the street people had gone into a local lotto place and had bought a ticket. Well, he won $500,000. Well, everyone was excited for this individual, and he knew that if he didn't get out of Yellowknife, that all the people that had been, so-called friends would be trying to tap him for money. So the first thing he did was he took his winnings and basically got on an airplane and headed south. Well, he had a wonderful time for about 3 months, and then the money ran out. And I remember coming back one day into the local library. He would be in the local library every single day, reading books and basically staying warm because, of course, 6 months out of the year, 7 months out of the year, Yellowknife is pretty cold. Well, here he was after about 3 months sitting in the library. And I approached him. I said, why are you back home? And he said, well, I spent all the money. He had $500,000, and in 3 months, he had spent every dime of it. And now I said, well, where are you now? He says, I'm back on the street. And it was then that I realized that, some people cannot handle money at all. We knew a fellow that was also had won the big one, and had bought this beautiful house and had outfitted himself with all the different gadgets and also all the things that he thought was going to be good. He also believed that because he had won the big one, that it was going to fix his marriage. So basically, what he did was he bought his wife all these things. And for a short period of time, it brought them happiness. But the reality of the situation was this: over time, the old problems began to, of course, you know, come back again. And the very things that they hoped that money would fix did not fix. You had two people in this beautiful home. They had all the things that the world could possibly give, but they were happy. They were living in separate parts of the house. And finally, one day, the lady walked up to him and said, "This is not working." And she said, "I want out." Well, instantaneously, she handed him divorce papers, and that's when his world crumbled. Well, about a week later, all the different things that they had accumulated, the motor home, the cars, all the toys that go with wealth. You know what happened? They basically ended up selling all of those, and he lost his marriage, he lost all of his toys, and he sold his home for a fraction on the dollar. In both situations, the underlying problem of what they had before, whether it was a poverty mentality or a broken marriage, money will not, of course, do anything about it. I want to tell you three stories right now of people who turned their lives around when they discovered that their money could be used for something different to help others. The first one is, of course, the story of J.D. Rockefeller. J.D. Rockefeller at the time was, of course, the richest man in America and most likely in the world as well. He owned Standard Oil. Now, back in his day, of course, oil was coming into its own. Today, of course, it is the very lubricant or the very thing that the world revolves around. I mean, let's face it, right now, the price of gas and oil in the world has substantially increased. And the reason, of course, is the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked off. And every day that the Straits of Hormuz are, of course, blocked off, 20% of the world's oil passes through that strait. And because of the Middle East, the prices of gas and oil around the world have substantially increased. In fact, Iran issued a statement this last week saying that they don't care how high the price of oil goes. Of course, they are an oil producing state and they have customers like, of course, other countries that are in what they call the axis of resistance. The more the price of oil goes, the higher, of course, their economy goes. That's what happened to the province of Alberta. We, of course, sit on the third largest oil reserves in the world. And we, of course, have seen our price of oil go up. And that goes directly into the Alberta economy, which can be good. But the reality of the situation, we've also seen the price of gas. In some places in America, the price of gas has doubled. And in the province of Alberta, we've seen it go up substantially. And so what's happening, of course, is it has caused a lot of economic difficulty. Well, in the day of J.D. Rockefeller, he owned Standard Oil and he had actually 90% of the monopoly of oil in that day. And in fact, what they had to do, what United States Congress had to do, was change the laws concerning ownership, and that said you can only own a certain area of a particular market so that there would be competition. It's called the Competitive Act, and it was designed for J.D. Rockefeller. Well, J.D. Rockefeller wasn't also just into oil. He had other different avenues and means to gain money. He was a very wealthy man. He had been working on this particular idea of becoming the world's richest man for decades. Well, when he was 53 years old, he received news from his doctor that he had only a few months to live. Well, that rocked his entire world. And he realized as he was getting this diagnosis, he walked home, and it was there as he was walking home, he realized that all that he had been working for, of course, was fragile. He said this way, he says, I was living in a house of cards. He says, no matter how wealthy I was, there was absolutely nothing that I could do to change the diagnosis. But he made what we would call a monumental decision. He called his lawyers and all his accounting people together, and he said, I want to change my entire way of living and life. He says, I have this vast fortune. He says, I want to use it for good. I want to use it for the benefit of others. You see, up to that moment, J.D. Rockefeller had been a very selfish individual. He had, a family, he had, friends, but the reality was when he, of course, had this particular diagnosis, Nobody could understand what was going on in his heart. His wife didn't understand. She tried to be empathetic, she tried to be sympathetic, but she also had been what we call a debutante. She was old money. And so she had been used to having the very best. Now, of course, her world and also her husband was facing certain death. Well, JD made a decision. He decided to give his money away. So what did he do? He then began to, of course, put together the J.D. Rockefeller Foundation. And he put this large pool of money aside. In fact, the majority of his fortune. And what happened was, as soon as he changed his whole philosophy, something changed in him. Not only did it change internally, not only did it change spiritually, it changed, of course, his entire outlook. Now, the interesting fact was that JD said, if this thing is going to kill me, I am going to become a giver for the rest of my life. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. As soon as he began to change his disposition and his philosophy, his health began to improve. J.D. Rockefeller then would live for another, of course, almost 50 years. He died at the age of 98. But the interesting thing is, he gave literally billions of dollars to different foundations, to different universities and hospitals and institutions that were for the good, of course, and he did it for a large and long period of time. And of course, many institutions, even today, many public areas, and of course, different media outlets that are doing good, and different hospitals and organizations are still benefiting from the seed money that, of course, J.D. Rockefeller put. He also put certain rules in place that the Rockefeller Foundation would be able, of course, to continue generating money, and they are still the largest giver, private giver of funds to charity and to the benefit of others in the United States. Let me tell you a second story of someone who gave generously. Back in the mid 2000s, around 2007, 2008, a man who is well known, of course, he is the founder of Burkholder and others as well. He gave some $36 billion to charity. And of course, we know him as he is. And he gave literally all this money. It was very interesting that this individual still lives in his same house that he bought back in 1956 for $35,000. And this individual, of course, he understood the importance of giving. The wonderful thing is that he still is a multi-billionaire, and he has discovered that the more that you give, guess what? The more that you get. You see, there's a very important principle when it comes to giving. When you give, it seems, of course, the law of sowing and reaping. It was the Lord who said simply this: whatever you sow, you will give. It was Jesus who brought this wonderful philosophy. He said, when you give, you will sow 30, 60, and 100 fold, especially when you do it for the benefit of others. In this beginning of this time together, I talked about how there were two individuals that won the big one, and how, of course, it was not money could not solve their problem. Then I was telling you the story of two individuals. I've got one more story to tell you of individuals who discovered that when you give, it seems that there's this wonderful principle of sowing and reaping. Let me give you a little example of that. My son happens to be a farmer. And in a little over a month, once the weather turns, my son is going to be heading into the field. He will be, of course, planting his crops for the season. And whatever seed he will put into the ground, he is going to have this belief and this faith that that seed is going to produce a harvest. My son last year decided, instead of planting barley into one field, he decided to go and plant canola by faith. And so basically, my son had bought the barley seed, and then him and his wife made a decision that they were going to plant canola. And I remember the day that my daughter-in-law headed into the local community that sold canola, and she spent $7,000 to be able to get this canola seed. Now, when they sold the canola seed, of course, when they planted it and the canola came up, they made 25 to 30 fold on their investment. Why? Because when you're a farmer, you know that when you sow, you are going to reap. And so it's a simple principle of the harvest that whatever you sow, you are going to reap. If you sow, of course, you will reap a harvest of 30, 60, and 100 fold. Well, of course, that individual, when he gave his $36 billion to, of course, charity, unfortunately, he also did it with a lot of fanfare. And the world said, "Oh, you're so wonderful. You gave all this money." And of course, he has been blessed since. He's now much, much older, but he has also, of course, continued to become a rich, rich man because of his generosity. He simply said, this. He said, "When I was a child, my dad taught me the importance of giving and giving back to the community, and also the importance of, philanthropy." The third story was actually the one I read this morning. That was kind of the very impetus of what I wanted to talk about today. And it is the story of Janet Scott. Janet Scott, of course, was the wife of Jeff Bezos up to 2019. And I was reading her story today that when she decided to leave her relationship, or actually what happened was Jeff Bezos, who is, of course, the founder of Amazon, she was with him when he started his great Amazon distributing company out of his garage, and built it into, of course, the company it is today. Amazon has not only, a distributor, an online distributor, but it has also, of course, gone into entertainment and other ventures as well. So anyway, in 2019, Jeff Bezos decided that he didn't want to stay in that relationship anymore. He wanted to have, other relationships. He wanted a younger woman. So basically, she left that relationship and she made a decision that she was going to be a giver. And she began not with the fanfare of other people. She was kind of like J.D. Rockefeller. J.D. Rockefeller wanted to give without all the fanfare. Of course, the individual that I was talking about in the second part was an individual who did it with great fanfare. But Janet Bezos made a decision that she was going to give away much of her wealth. She had grown up with the idea that it was better to give than to receive. The all of a sudden had this large pool of money that was part of the settlement that, of course, she got from Jeff Bezos. So, of course, she began to quietly give it away. And over time, since 2019, she has given away $19 billion. And she discovered something. The more that she gave away, the more came back into her. And she said, she says, "I learned a very important principle about giving. It is better to give than to receive. She says, the more that I gave away, the more that seemed to come back into me. And she said, it's not just materially. She says, every day I wake up with a wonderful feeling in my heart. And she says, who can I give money today to help for the benefit of others? Literally, she has helped hundreds of different organizations around the world. I mean, we can also talk about Bill Gates and how that Bill Gates has used his money to help, of course, people around the world, just like his wife has been able to help people. These individuals have discovered the power of giving and the power that kindness can really be a motivator. I told you these stories today because I want to motivate you to be people who give. Now, giving is not just material. It is also giving of your time, your talents, and your resources to the benefit of others. I want to share one final story today about a fella who I know personally. I had the privilege of being this man's pastor for a number of years in a small town in central Alberta. The fella's name was John, and John was a local mechanic, but he was also the deputy fire chief, and also as well, a man who was known to help others. He was a mechanic, and so he would help people mechanically. He would, someone could phone up John, and if he had time, he would take that time and go and help and fix, of course, different things. And he would do it for free. He would also, of course, help people through his capacity as the assistant fire chief. There were literally hundreds of people that he rescued because he was in charge of the rescue aspect of the Slave Lake Fire Department. That means that he would go and he would use medical training that he had, because he had got an EMT training as well. And so he literally helped hundreds of people. Well, John contracted cancer and only lasted about a year and a half. I had the privilege of doing his funeral, and there were literally hundreds of people that showed up to his funeral. And it was interesting that afterwards, when we were gathering together for the luncheon afterwards, literally dozens of people came to me with their stories of how John had helped them. John was not a wealthy man, but John took his time, his talents, and his resources that was available to him, and he poured it into people. He lived a life well lived. So my encouragement for you today is, whatever your resources are, whatever your time is, whatever your talent is, give it to the benefit of others. I shared these stories with you today to be a motivation to help others, to realize that it's better to give than to receive. That when you give kindness, kindness will come back to you. When you sow talent for the benefit of others, it will come back to you in many different forms. We're not just talking materially. There is a wonderful sense and a wonderful feeling when you help and give to others. That's what I'm talking about today. That sense of serene, that sense of calmness, that sense of giving. I remember this one particular time when I was still doing broadcasting, and it was in the first or second year of course, my broadcasting career. We had the privilege of going down and preparing a meal as a organization. The station in which I was involved in, all of the on-air personality, and also as well many of the support staff of that particular organization, our job was one night to cook and distribute the meal for the Christmas dinner. Well, it was the Thanksgiving dinner. We went down, we cooked the meal. It took us about 5 hours of our time, and we were able to distribute to over 500 people the meal and also to serve. It was a wonderful experience. There was a camaraderie that could only happen when you are giving. And when we served the food, we saw the many different people that normally we would not interact with. And there was a sense of well being. And many of the people that we served came back and thanked us for our kindness. Well, all we were doing, we were only there for one night, but there were literally people who had been serving and helping literally, for hundreds of times. There was one volunteer who was celebrating their 500th time of helping out. She that night had come to help us, and we heard story after story. She was sharing story after story how that she felt so good about helping people out. She said, I don't have much money, but she says, this is my way of giving back. So whether it's through volunteerism, through some organization, giving of your resources, giving of your time, giving of your talent, guess what? When you do it for the benefit of others, there is, even though you're not doing it for, the benefit of yourself, there is a wonderful feeling and also as well a direct result of giving. So today, that is what I am encouraging you to do. Not only should you do it individually, but if you have a family, do it as well. There have been many times over the years where my family was involved with, of course, giving as we were doing it as a family. So do it as a family. Teach it to your children. When I was talking about that individual, his dad spoke to him and said, when you give, you will have not only a sense of well-being and a sense of accomplishment, you will have a sense that you've helped others. And that is what giving is really all about. It's about helping others and that wonderful sense of well-being and also the sense of being able to be a blessing to others. And that's what it's all about. It's about being a blessing. There's an old song that says, make me a blessing. And that's my prayer for you and I today. Father, I want to thank you today for the story of Janet Bezos, the story of J.D. Rockefeller, the story of others that gave their time, like John. Father, I pray today that as we start this brand new week, that we will choose to give, whether it is financially, whether it has something to do with our time, our talent, or our resources, and that we would discover the principle, of course, of sowing and reaping, and also the incredible benefit that comes inside when we touch others. I remember this one particular time where I took a group of people from my church and we went down to a local food bank. And for the day, we, of course, packed, different packages for those that needed the recipient. I remember there was a little, a trepidation in the part of the people that came. But then as they began to realize the incredible gift that they were giving, their entire disposition changed. And I remember after we had finished doing what we had done, the conversation that the people were talking about, how that they felt so good about being able to contribute to the benefit of others. And many became, of course, involved in the local food bank and became even more generous, not only in their benefit of others, but the giving to the church and the well-being that came from it. That is absolutely wonderful. So, Father, I pray today that we would be generous with our time, generous with our talents, and generous with our resources. And we're not doing it just for our own self and the well-being that comes with it, but we're doing it to help others. And that, of course, is important. As I close today, I use the example of Matthew chapter 25. One day, it says that the king came and he was distributing, blessings and benefits for others. And the people who received benefits and blessings, they said, "Why are you doing it?" He said, "Because you did it to the least of these." What he was talking about was, of course, helping the poor, helping the vulnerable, being there as a voice to those who have no voice. He says, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. What Jesus was saying is, when we do it for the benefit of others, we are helping others. Well, I close with this final story. When Mother Teresa won the Nobel Prize, basically the people came to her and said, "Okay, we're going to go and see your work in Calcutta." Well, of course, the media saw what was they're doing, and they said, "How can you minister to the lepers in Calcutta so easily?" And she said very simply, "I look at each one as Jesus in his distressing disguise." I like that. And so today, let us look at others as Jesus in his distressing disguise, and let us realize that there is a benefit that is coming. Maybe it doesn't come instantaneously, but it does come. The sense of well-being will, of course, be something that lingers longer than we could possibly imagine. Thank you for that. Now, in Jesus' name, amen. Well, many of us, of course, call the principle giving. Some call it philanthropy. Either way, today, when the opportunity comes, make sure that you seize on that opportunity. Don't walk away from the opportunity. You know why? Because your giving of yourself, of your time, your talents, and resources for the benefit of others has so many benefits, far reaching and far wonderful, even greater than you'll ever think. People may not always remember what you said, but they always remember what you did and how you made them feel. Make them feel good. Make them feel like someone cares, because your act of kindness and caring could actually change their life. My name is Robert Dean Steele. I want to thank you today for spending time with me. And also, as well, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, I want to encourage you today to press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I want to thank all the people that are subscribing to my YouTube channel. You have made my work so wonderfully rewarding, and I want to thank you for that. I also want you to check out my daily YouTube shorts. Every day I put on, of course, different videos. I'm now approaching almost 10,000 videos, and I want to thank every single one that views my videos, whether it's in this form or the YouTube shorts. Please check those out as well. Those, of course, are my daily videos that I usually do under about 1 minute and have one particular thought. But every one of them is designed to encourage, illuminate, and enlighten your day. Maybe to give you a thought that you hadn't thought about before. Check those out as well. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for joining me. Have yourself a great and godly day. And don't forget, if you go to the church or to a church, go to church today.